you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Mile High Hockey Lab. My name is Adrian Hernandez. I'm here today with Evan and Jackie to talk Colorado Avalanche. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are watching the podcast on YouTube, on the broadcast, good job. That's really awesome. That's the first place you ever get to see and hear from us over here at the Mile High Hockey Lab. While I have your attention, please don't forget to share, comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and be on the lookout on Spotify, iTunes, and Audible for every broadcast following each live broadcast here on YouTube. So, we got a lot to talk about today in terms of Colorado Avalanche. The All-Star break is here. So what better time to kind of get into things? I'll start with you, Evan, and then I'll head over to you, Jackie. But I want to talk a little bit about the Avalanche and their recent games against the Anaheim Ducks and the St. Louis Blues. Of course, they lost to the Ducks, but did in fact beat the Blues to win 7 of 8. Evan, what's your takeaway from each game starting with Anaheim?
Yeah, I mean that Anaheim game was obviously a killer. And we've seen the Avs play down now to their opponents against Anaheim, Arizona, Chicago, and Vancouver in their losses. So far from ideal on that front. And the Blues, that was started off great, didn't end hot. But the Avs hung on in the end. And I think kind of the main theme you can take from both games is, the third period collapses that both games had for the Avs.
Yeah.
They simply came out on the wrong foot and faltered against these teams in the third period after they had been doing pretty good in the first two periods and had chances to put the game to bed in both of those games, but they didn't take advantage of it. So that's obviously something to focus on post All-Star break.
Yeah, and Jackie, do you agree with that? Do you think the Avs need to kind of focus on playing 3 periods and, finishing, I guess?
Definitely. My takeaway from these games are that I think this is where you really see that they needed Val Nichushkin.
Yeah.
He was missing, and it's uh it's part of them just being so, I guess, soft in the third periods. Maybe that's not the best word for it, but you expect a pushback from any team that's down, but both of these happen almost immediately, like
Yeah.
just the first shift of the period. So you can't really even point to momentum or fatigue. Uh, it does seem like those mental lapses are creeping back into their game. And then when they don't have a strong forecheck to really fall back on, and they don't have the defenseman that they need to be able to get them out of their zone, it does seem like they're a little bit figured out, like how they can get pressured again. So
Gotcha.
it is definitely something they need to figure out. And you can even throw the Washington game in there. Like that third period wasn't great either.
That's a good
Um,
point. I hadn't really thought of like the factor that, maybe because they say it does take about a season or two for teams to catch up in terms of defensive structure for a team that's kind of different in a certain aspect. And I do think like the Avs were unique in that the defense has such a strong role in like jumping up into the play. And although like the roster has been depleted on the back end, it does kind of make sense to me, like the way you mentioned it, that they've kind of been figured out in some ways too. And then that, to me, that kind of falls on the coaching staff because it feels like the GM and the management is kind of just doubling down on the approach in terms of play style. So that seems like a coaching thing to figure out again how to, I guess, come at teams in the form of a surprise or something that they're not able to adjust to as well. What do you think of that, Evan?
Yeah, I was gonna say you actually make a really solid point on that. You still see me nodding my head along, and that's actually a really solid point. I mean, the Avalanche are the 2022 Stanley Cup champions. They were the best team in the NHL. They were the example. They were what teams are studying over the summer. How do we be like the Avalanche? How do you let your defenseman jump into play? How do you move the puck so gracefully? How do you forecheck like that and do that for 60 minutes or more nightly, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, teams have adapted to that now at this point. They've watched the Avs, they've seen what they've did, they have seen what they've done. I mean, even just like a small examples, like on the power play, you have the drop pass now. Teams are covering that. I know the Blues on their penalty kill, they usually had one guy just waiting in the Avs zone in case they did drop it back to
Right.
McKinnon or whoever else was coming up in the middle. So teams have adapted, and so it is definitely on the coaching staff to be like, okay, how do we improvise? How do we improve? How do you go about this moving forward, right? And I'm sure that Bednar will work with something on that. And of course, you have the injuries to look back on and say, we haven't been able to, try these new things or even look at new things because of the injuries. And while it is kind of an excuse, I guess you could say, it is legitimate and is maybe part of the reason why they are, so low is because they haven't been able to do much coaching wise.
Yeah, I agree. And we're talking here, just kind of recapping Ducks and Avs and Blues and Avs. But Jackie, I don't want to put words in your mouth per se. That was just kind of my interpretation of what you said when you said, maybe they've been found out. Is my interpretation off, or is that kind of what you meant?
No, I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
It's like their competitive advantage is their back end when they have everybody or close to
Right.
everybody. And even though the other teams at this point definitely know what the Avs are trying to do, it's like they don't have the horses to both copy it or stop it. But when you
Right.
have guys filling in back there that are like McDermott and England and Hunt and they can get exposed.
That
So
makes total sense. Like
that's
that makes
that
that.
part is on coaching um because Bednar knows that this is what's at his disposal. I think he has tried to simplify some stuff,
Yeah.
but it's still coming out in the breakout is still very difficult and how they can get pressured like that in the third periods.
Yeah. It's almost like that play style only works for like a very elite defensive group. And when you don't have those guys, the horses, as you put it, like it's more of a vulnerability than it is a strength to have that play style. That makes like a lot of sense to me. They did seem like they had a little bit more jump and a little more grit against the Blues, which I think is natural given the recent history between the Avs and Blues. And speaking on recent history of Avs and Blues, we saw another episode from Jordan Binnington, and I'm starting to feel like I'm tired of even giving his antics a platform. But I guess I'll just get first your takeaway, Jackie. What does that display tell you about Binnington, and are you like a fan of that sort of thing from a goaltender, or what's your take?
I would say I'm not a fan. I guess I'm trying to think like, what if Georgiev was like that? What would it be like? I guess it would have to depend on the context of
Right.
like what sets him off, what is it about it? Because I do in general like fiery competitive players, but from a goaltender, it does seem so distracting and it's like goaltenders get a free pass, and even
Yeah, they're
Georgiev
protected.
mentioned
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
is is like they can get away with stuff, and it is funny that earlier in the year, even like the refs were just like calling penalties on him, like enough was enough. Um, Part of it is like the rivalry, like I know I've said on this podcast several times. I do feel like that might be the Avs' biggest rival right now is the Blues. So, it's okay that some of that comes out in it, but I think the disappointing part for me was that gave them life. Like somehow they got a power play out of it, which that was a bit unfair, but it gave them life. So it does basically validate his antics, which is unfortunate. You'd rather
Yeah.
have it hurt them.
Yeah, he'd rather have it blow up in their face than spur on a couple of goals or a
Right.
goal. Yeah.
So like I said, I do think it's part of the rivalry. It does get old, especially how they have to bring up Kadri and his
Right.
injury, which all of that's BS. But it's just it's I guess it's part of it. Like in a way, it's nice to know that they can get to him.
Right.
Like they've
It feels
gotten him
good kind of
several
to make him
times.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
behave that way sometimes. It's like
Right.
when you're the older brother and your little brother finally or just older sibling, and your younger sibling finally just freaks out because you've been poking and prodding them for so long. Yeah, there's a slight satisfaction to it, definitely. Evan, like, does it bother you as much as it bothers me that, like Jackie mentioned, he doesn't have to answer really to any of his antics in terms of actually fighting? And I think it was funny. Adrian, if you're like a Avalanche fan on Twitter, like Adrian, she does like awesome art and stickers. She's like Kadri's biggest fan, and so I think she has a little bit of an edge to this opinion. But she said if Frankie was on the ice, she doesn't think that the ref would have been able to stop him from going to that end anyway. Are you? Does that bother you as much as it bothers most Avs fans to see him act like that?
Hey, her and Frankie are like best buds. I know
Yeah,
that for a fact. So good for them. I would have but I mean, at least in Bennington's sense, yeah, it is getting annoying. And I think to kind of further not fuel the fires, that's not the right phrase, but I guess that's the best one I can come up with right now, is that somehow after all of that, St. Louis got a power play and they scored on it. And that
yeah.
was
Wasn't
like
that something?
I think that left everyone clueless, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he went after Curtis freaking McDermott. I mean, good luck with that. That
I
was
loved how he just
that was a
smiled at him.
decision. I
Yeah.
know, right? And it was interesting. Like it's like this isn't 90s hockey anymore. And I
Right.
know I wasn't alive for 90s hockey, so I can't say anything about it, of course. But I mean, when you look back at like the Red Wings and the Avs and Waz fights and with Osgood and things like that,
Yeah.
that's a whole different realm of hockey that has just kind of passed, that has moved on in 30
Yeah.
years. And
And I'm with Jackie
yeah,
too. Like I feel like it's like you almost rewarded him if and like you said, they got a penalty, they got a goal, and it was kind of a brand new game based on him doing something that like he has no answer, hasn't doesn't have to answer for at all. So I think that's a good point in bringing up that I wish
yeah,
he would. I'm glad, like Jackie said, whenever he does it, he's usually losing. So
that's
I'm
true.
I'm I'm here for every single flash of that. So, you know, with
Yeah,
the
I
beating
do
the
have a hot
Blues,
take. Oh,
go ahead. Go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I have a hot take. If a goalie gets a penalty, they should sit in the box. And you know,
Specifically
if
Bennington.
specifically Bennington, yes, just call it.
That fan did something for all of
Oh,
us.
that was hilarious. I think at
Finally.
that point, just call it the Bennington penalty.
Yeah.
He like I don't know. I'm trying to think of a goaltender that's
Yeah.
not Winnipeg number 37, the Bennington, and just
Yeah,
call it
there you
that,
go.
and just have him
Yeah.
go sit, have
Well,
it go. Connor Hellebuck sit in the box, and then I don't know if you
yeah.
bring in the backup or
That
have
would be hilarious.
a player just sit there. I don't know, but it would just be
Josh
funny.
Josh
I would like to
Manson's.
see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just have another Josh Manson, and just hope it doesn't go right into your face.
Yeah, well, fortunately, the Avalanche were able to beat the Blues despite Bennington's best effort to kind of spur on a comeback. And the Avs, ended up winning 7 of their last 8 heading into the All Star break after dropping that one to Anaheim. Do you think this kind of winning streak is enough to spur on a pretty solid second half push, Jackie? Combining that with who's coming back to the roster likely.
Probably. I hope the kind of extreme roller coaster's done.
Yeah,
Um,
that would be nice.
yeah, because it's it's a little bit hard to put a finger on exactly why they've been so up and down. Like teams naturally do have ebbs and flows, but like losing 5 in a row and then winning 6 in a row is a little extreme.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I don't know. I guess you would hope for stability, especially with it seems like Byram and Manson are going to be ready after the break. So you'd like to think that that would kind of stop the wild swings. But I
Right.
think in general they'll probably play well enough into the second half. I don't think we're going to go back to early January again. I hope not. So like good enough probably.
Gotcha. You think like Evan, and just kind of to bounce off of what she just said, do you think like the outlook has changed enough to move on from like just settling for I guess the 3 seed in the Central, or do you think the Avs should have bigger eyes? I guess.
I think they should have bigger eyes. And I actually think before you continue, I think the live stream is screwed up. So I'll let you
Oh,
deal with
really?
that before I answer. But anywho,
Interesting.
I think they should have bigger aspirations. I feel like you shouldn't settle. Um, and when you have guys when you have guys. Oh my God, excuse me. When you have guys returning, like Manson, like Byram, um, players that are gonna help, especially on that back line, and give Eric Johnson some rest because he's been asked a lot of in this final year of his contract, and having to play up on the first defensive pairing. That's not something I don't think he had in his on his list of things that were going to happen in the season, and
Yeah.
things like that. I think it will help definitely to an extent. Um, I actually in our MHH roundtable that's coming out tomorrow, just plugging that really quickly. I do have an answer about where the Avs will finish in the Central, so I'll save that response for then. I won't share it,
Yeah.
but um,
Suspense.
I know, give the people something to read about,
Hey, I
But
like that.
I just think there should be more aspirations, and I think really the one thing that I'm at least hoping for right now out of the rest of this season is that Landeskog shows up by his, I think it was March 15th, kind of timeline, was that he'd be back. Was it on the ice or was it playing by then? I don't remember
I think
exactly,
I
but
think
playing. I think that's
playing,
playing.
yeah.
the new hope, but you never know.
That's
Yeah,
the
I was
hope,
gonna
because I mean
say.
he's had so many setbacks. It was originally, oh yeah, he'll be in November, and then it was like, oh, it's actually he had surgery, it's going to January, and then it was like, okay, maybe it's February, and now it's March, right? Like I don't like that it keeps getting pushed back. I would hope that he will return on March 15th. I know ESPN said that he had been in Philadelphia and Toronto doing some work, probably just off the ice work if I had to guess. So hopefully not pushing it too much and putting too much strain on that knee. So that's really what I hope for, because when the heartbeat of the team is back, this team will hopefully have a good March and April. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, the Landeskog situation is just such a bummer because it feels like we've just been waiting and waiting, and this is dramatic for sure. This is what I'm about to say is dramatic, but it almost feels like the season hasn't even started again because Landeskog hasn't been back. Like the whole group, we've not really gotten even to relive what last year was, based on the fact that one of the biggest pieces of such a great team has been gone the entire season. So I'm anxious to see what his return will bring to the play style of the Avs, and also I think it'll make this seeming void in the 2C position feel not all that abrupt or not all that present. And so I just sent out our live poll of the week, and if you haven't already, head on over to Twitter and follow us at MHH_lab, and you can also follow Mile High Hockey at Mile High Hockey. Go ahead, Evan. What's up?
Shoot, hold on. We're gonna talk about trades later on, right?
Right.
Yes.
Because there's a huge one that just dropped. So
No
not
way.
for
Let's hit
not
me with it.
not for
Let's
the
go.
Avs. Just
Let's
Okay.
jump
go.
into it. Okay.
Yeah, before
Okay.
we even introduce the poll, because it might
Okay.
change perception. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm like,
Today at 3:43 p.m. The New
Five
York
minutes ago.
Islanders have acquired Bo Horvat from the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for
Oh,
Anthony Beauvillier, Atu Rati, and a conditional first-round pick in the 2023 draft.
that's
so
too
the
much.
so the two
It's
C
way
chip
too
that
much.
everybody talked about has left the board, and yeah, for quite a return. Holy
I
moly!
know. Well, I mean, that's what Vancouver was asking for. They were asking for guys and a pick. And
Yeah,
I know if the Avs were interested, they were definitely going to be wanting that first round pick
That's
yeah,
way
that
too
first round
much
pick
for a
that the Avs had.
rental.
yeah.
Like, are
Tell
the
me,
Islanders going to
say
be able to
more.
pay him $8
Yeah,
million for an extension?
yeah. Good question.
I guess
That's why.
we'll see what the
Yeah,
conditional's on, but didn't they outlaw conditional picks based on extensions? Like, didn't the league
I
say you
think
can't
those
do that
two.
anymore?
Yeah, those two like can't be contingent upon each other. Yeah, like the two can exist but separately. I'm pretty sure.
But
That's.
I'm glad it's over because I seriously am so sick about hearing about that guy.
Yeah,
So it
well, it's a
looks
It
good
at
was never
him.
segue
it
because
was never gonna happen. So
yeah, it
No.
really
there you
wasn't,
go.
and I
We're
don't
breaking
think.
news on the podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. Heck yeah. Well, I don't think so. We'll do the live poll now then. So the question is, how should the Avalanche approach the trade deadline? Well, a lot of
Not
the
going for
talk
Bo
was,
Horvat.
yeah, not going for Bo Horvat. He's off the board. One of the choices was, should they go for a 2C? He fits into that. Should they do nothing? And if fans have a different opinion on it, a different approach, I wrote other and that they can write it in. So we'll read off some of those depending when we get some reactions, but we'll double back to that when we have a few more votes so we can really weigh the results in an accurate way. Jackie, you said that that's like a lot in terms of return. Are there many pieces on the board in 2C that won't require a lot of return like that?
Well, it depends if you're talking rental or
Right.
non-rental. Like, um, usually rentals kind of more like a first or a second and a prospect, depending on how good the prospect is. So, I'd have to see what Bavillier's contract is, but to get a real roster player, I believe Ratu's like a good prospect and a conditional, which of course we'd have to hear what that conditional is, but that's too much for a rental. And I guess then the question is, do they think they're going to extend him? Do the Islanders have enough money to extend him?
Yeah.
Seems a bit odd. I don't know. Like, we go through this every year. Like it was Giroux, and he was going to bring all this back, and it's like you can't think about acquiring some guy in his prime. You hear like, oh, Horvat would have taken New Hook, a first, and Barons. It's like that's insane. Like you for a
Yeah.
rental, like to give
Yeah.
that's basically like every last thing they have left. So
Yeah. Rental with not much cap room, like you're mentioning, to make him not a rental. It's a clear as
yeah.
day rental at this point. Like that's my biggest fear. Like the Avs don't really have enough draft capital, and they really don't have the space to make a trade that would be beneficial because they would have to send cap for cap. And I mean, that's if, I don't even know how the long term IR works in terms of Landeskog contract. Like, it's different for every team. There's actually a lot that goes into how much comes off your cap based on who you have on the LTR. So I don't even know if that's weaponized, a thing that can be weaponized for the Avalanche. So, with that said,
Well,
go ahead.
the big thing with Landy would be, is he coming back before the playoffs or not? Is he going to do the Kucherov? And
Right.
I don't think the Avs would prefer that because Benner likes to get his group together and have everybody gel and get consistency and all that. So I don't think the Avs are going to try that. But if he misses this next, I guess, benchmark, you could say, and if then we're talking about April, then I think you really have to take it serious. But then that's the other thing. Okay, so let's say they even have 7 million cap space. Great. Like, who are you going to go get to fill it?
Right.
Um,
Well, and
so
exactly, and at the end of the year, it's still a true rental because you're gonna have to find somewhere to offload a contract. Obviously, there's the Johnson stuff, but then at the same time, the McKinnon contract will start to come into play in terms of his AAV on the new contract. So it gets a little bit more complicated in terms of that. I'm with you. Like, I think that they should do nothing at the deadline and just ride with what they've got because I feel like they made their acquisitions in the off season, which is typical of recent Avs management. Like, they keep the guys that they bring in out of situations that make sense for both sides. I hope that they don't leave that character because I think it's what's made them you know simultaneously make great moves but also not lose depth. So Evan, like, what's your takeaway? Do you think the Avs, should be shopping for a 2C, or are they just not in the position to be shopping at all?
I'm actually going to go with the other option on that poll, an other.
Okay.
Um, I think that if they do anything at the trade deadline, it's going to be somewhere in the depth, like fourth liner.
Okay.
And I would guess that maybe they might think that Ben Myers might not be the answer, like when it comes to the stretch and like going into the playoffs. So they might want to look for some like another Andrew Cogliano or another Nico
Right.
Sturm, maybe. obviously,
Well,
of
and
course, not those two. And
yeah,
so maybe
Tyson
Nico
Jost.
Storm.
I'm just
I don't
kidding.
know. Gosh,
Yeah,
that would just boil, I feel like, a
couldn't help
lot of
myself.
people.
Yeah,
Playing him on the fourth line. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
But anyhow, I feel like that's what they would go for. I don't think they would go for a 2C. I think partially because of New Hook's kind of emergence, because I think he's on a 4 game point streak right now. He's up
Hmm.
to 12 goals. He's been stellar, at least right in this stretch anyway. So you have to hope that continues. Comfort 2 has been good this season, kind of filling in whenever he can. Obviously he had that really good stretch in December. So I think the team is just going to hope on those two to produce on the second line, second, third line. Same with Landeskog when he comes back. Wherever they decide to place Evan Rodriguez as well, he'll flourish. And so I think it'll just be somewhere in the depth. I mean, it would probably
Yeah,
be
well,
replacing one
this is a
like Ben
good time.
Meyers.
Yeah, it's a good time to talk about the trade that they have made already prior to the show, which is to bring Matt Nieto back and Ryan Merkley in exchange for Martin Kaut. And who was the other piece? I don't know why. Oh, Jacob
Jacob
McDonald.
McDonald.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. Like that's in alignment with bolstering kind of the depth and the PK for sure. Jackie, initially, like what were your thoughts when you saw the news break on that trade?
Um, I guess I don't know if happy is the right word, but I guess satisfied with it. It made sense. They got the NHL player back in the deal. They didn't really give anything up. Um, like I've wanted Kaut to get a fresh start, so I think it's good for him. I mean, it's bittersweet for me. I still really like him as a player, but he needed to go to a different organization. Merkley's interesting. Uh, he's very much in the same boat, and so it made sense there. I like. It's funny when you trade first round picks, you still kind of got to win the optics trade too, and
Yeah.
it's like both guys really definitely needed a fresh start, and yet they still were traded for each other. They were first round picks in the same draft class, and very
Hmm.
close to where they were picked as well. So it's just kind of funny how it works out that way. I was a little bit concerned about Nieto because the Sharks games that I have watched, he looked a little bit slow to me. And I think he's played well with the Avs, but I think he's also kind of faded in both of the games that he played. So I think that's going to be something to watch. But I mean, at the end of the day, they traded out Jacob McDonald, who was not working out at forward. I mean, it was just an experiment that needed to end
Yeah,
months ago
for
for a
sure.
guy that they know is an NHL player, PKs, everything. So it's like they didn't give anything up, and it definitely feels like one of those under the radar shrewd moves that they make. I don't think that they're going to get like some miracle with Merkley. I think maybe that's what a lot of opinions out there are hinging on. But like it, at worst, it's shuffling deck chairs. So they're not going to lose anything by this move.
Yeah,
Didn't
that's what it
Merkley
felt
score this
like to
weekend?
me. What's that? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, didn't Merkley score this weekend for the Eagles? Or
He got an
am I?
assist.
It was an assist. Okay.
Yeah. So the interesting thing with him is that he had made this trade request right at New Year's, and he hasn't played. Like they sent him home.
Hmm.
So it's not that unusual to let it be known you wouldn't mind a fresh start, but to the point where either he decided to stay home or the organization told him to stay home, that's a bit unusual. So there was pretty much a ticking clock there that they had to move him. And so, um, it's something worth, I guess, keeping in mind, I guess. And he's a third year pro as well, so his contract's going to be up, his waiver exemption's going
Hmm.
to be up. So if the Avs think he has any value, they kind of need to figure out like if he
Soon.
does, because then they'll
Yeah.
just need to waive him next year. And so, but I think he did all right with the Eagles, especially the second game. They let him run the first power play unit, which is where he got the assist. It was like a tip goal. So the AHL box score is never right. So they always think like the guy that shot the puck always scored the goal, and that's not always the
Yeah.
case.
No.
There's
That,
tips and rebounds and things like that. So it did get corrected, but at the very least, they needed a power play quarterback there. So at very least, that's something they have now, which the Eagles were signing guys off the street because they had so many problems with defensive depth. But
yeah, which in
so
lines
that's how
with
I
the
feel about.
Avalanche problems. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The Avs
Yeah.
took some of their defensemen, and then they lost some on their own, and they've really been trying to fill the hole in the bucket there. So, um, I'm cautiously optimistic on Merkley. Like, it'll be interesting for me watching him with the Eagles, but he definitely has a long way to go.
So he's pretty much a reclamation project in your mind.
Yeah, yeah, I would
Okay.
say. And for anyone that isn't familiar with him, he's very stylistically similar to Gerard, which I know, sorry for the
Dun
haters,
dun
but
dun.
very, very similar, smaller, shifty guy, good hands, good passer, does not have a lot of strength in the shot. And if anybody thinks Sam's not physical on the boards, well, then you need to watch. I love that.
Yes.
You need to watch Merkley, who I think hasn't been told that you're allowed to hit in professional hockey. So they're
Yeah.
going to have to, uh, you know,
Work on that.
Cronin's a really good coach, so he'll smarten him up there. But
I was
that's what I
wondering what
think
your
about that
whiteboard.
trade.
I was wondering what your whiteboard said.
Yeah,
So
I felt like it was kind
nice to
of.
know.
I write in all caps, so it can look like a whole big blob. But yeah, I was at the game against Anaheim when he had a goal and assist real early on in the game.
Yeah,
Obviously, they didn't win, but he looked good. I'm a little concerned though because he looked like he was playing as if a team who he might play for in the future was watching him. That's not to be like look too deep in his performance, but it's either that or he was just sick of it because he did look like he had a little bit of something to prove. Which might just be personal. Like he might be wanting to prove something to himself right now. It might have nothing to do with fans. It might have nothing to do with being traded. But I couldn't help but kind of put two and two together. Evan, like, do you think that that's something? There might be something to that, or am I just making up fan fiction over here?
I mean, professional athletes are not at the will, but they're exposed to the world, and especially when you're in the eyes of millions of eyeballs, there's going to be people that don't like you. And
Right,
so I think for Sammy, I'm sure he's probably been aware of them, not only just this season, but probably in the past as
past
well,
right.
like the last few years. So, maybe that could have been affecting him. It's a mistake if they trade him. It really is. Like if it happens, I'm gonna be like, where did Chris McFarland learn that one from? Because he obviously
Yeah,
had a great teacher with Joe Sakic, above him before this. So, I think it's a mistake. So, we'll kind of see what happens. But I do want to go back to the Merkley trade,
yeah.
um, because we haven't talked about the other name that went to San Jose, Martin Kaut.
Martin Kaut. Yeah.
And I know Jackie. I'm sure you have comments on this, so I'll keep my piece
Well,
short.
she
But
mentioned that like it's probably a good change of scenery for him. Like he needs a different opportunity to make an impact somewhere in the actual NHL lineup.
yeah,
But
and that's what I was going to say too. Is that that it is ultimately a failure on the Avs to not produce him, but what's the word? I'm
progress
blanking on
him,
the
I
word.
guess. Yeah.
Progress him, yeah. Develop him. That's what I was
There
looking
you
for.
go.
It's a failure on their front to develop him, being stuck in the AHL for what was it, 4 5 years. That's not going to help a guy, and only a handful of games a year is also not going to help a guy.
Right.
And I feel like you could also maybe see it too in the recent stretch of games that he'd had for the Avs, is that he there's not much he can do on that fourth line. I mean, it's not
Right.
his play style. And so getting to actually go get some NHL time with San Jose, yeah, it's not the best club in the world to go, play with, but it's better than maybe sitting in the AHL. But then again, I think I saw on Twitter that he was with the Barracuda and he scored like his 100th career goal or something like that
Nice.
down there.
That's cool.
So
yeah,
Jackie, do
he
you do you think that's true?
or,
Like, do you think it's a failure of development?
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
he was their best chance to get a graduation this year, and
Yeah.
obviously
Good
they're
point.
not. So then the question becomes who's going to graduate?
Right?
Like
Someone just got
who's
bumped up pretty quick.
or is anybody? Are they even
Yeah.
going to try to graduate anyone? And it's like no, they're going to buy at the deadline and this is their team and they're done with the youth and then we're going to hear all summer, oh yeah, but Foodie's going to be on the team. What about Olausen? What about Sampo? And it's like, no, if these guys aren't getting the time now, like,
What
where's the
makes you
next
say?
graduation?
Yeah.
And
We've
so,
learned from the Cal experience that these guys aren't all that close.
right. And so
Yeah.
he was the one where it was like, did the is it a failure? But he was on the team most of the year. Did they finally decide it? Because they kind of had to make it work. Like they need depth
Mm-hmm.
so bad, they needed to make it work, and it was like he's useful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It is frustrating. It definitely is, and yes, they did send him to the AHL. I think part of it is because his waiver exemption. I think he only has like one more game before the waiver exemption is up again. So maybe San Jose didn't want to
Deal with
commit
that.
to that. Maybe they're waiting
Yeah.
to trade some other guys at the deadline because he should not be in the AHL any longer.
No.
And you saw that 2 games he had
Especially
a
not
goal
on
and
San
two
Jose's
assists.
team. Yeah.
So and they need to give him a test drive because they need to figure out are they gonna sign him after his ELC. So I really hope that he'll be up with them soon because there's absolutely nothing for him in the AHL. Like he's proved he's a good player there. Um,
Yeah. I agree. I agree
but we
with
don't
that.
know. Like, were they even that interested in him? Was he just a throw in? Was he just
Right.
to make the Merkley deal not look so bad? Um, so
Yeah.
we don't know either. Like, do they even have any interest in him? But they
Right.
should because they're going to need players and cheap players to get them through their rebuild. So we'll
Yeah.
wait and see. But I'm definitely very hopeful for him.
Well,
Yeah,
from my standpoint,
I think the only thing we can say just real quickly is we should hope for the best for him.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Simply
We
put.
definitely hope the best for him. But along those lines too of like throwing Cout in to make the Merkley thing not look so bad. Like I think Cout's the stronger piece in terms of what they got in return between he and Jacob
Yeah, he's
McDonald.
NHL ready. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so I would totally agree with you in terms of like I think if you want to soften the blow as an Avs fan, the question is like in the playoffs and come towards the end of the season, who do you want more, Matt Nieto or Martin Kaut? And I think Matt Nieto does kind of win that battle just in terms of bolstering the bottom
Sure.
six and PK and having the veteran stuff kind of with all that. But I'm with you. Like I do still think that Kaut has a style that would work as depth in the playoffs in a deep playoff run too. So I'm a little disappointed to see him go just as a fan of his, but I do think like it'll bring about hopefully some improvement and a place that he kind of fits a little bit better based on kind of how he plays hockey. But we'll double back to kind of our live poll results just to give you guys a feel on where the fans are right now. So the question was, how should the Avalanche approach the trade deadline? The choices were go for a 2C, do nothing, and other write-in. We got 78% of 69 votes so far say go for a 2C. 16% of those same votes say do nothing, and 6% say other. And our write-ins are, funny enough, the first one was, I was going to say go get Horvat, LOL. And then the second one is there is no 2C that makes sense. I think they spend their fourths and fifths on or B prospects getting rentals that get them deeper and protect them from injury. Maybe Grant Kulikov from the Ducks or similar type players. Let's not forget the importance of those extra players in last year's run, which is kind of what I was talking about with Kaut just now. Jackie, maybe you can respond. Well, actually, no, Evan. Let's start with you because I think I just gave it to Jackie. Evan, tell me, do you agree with that? Like, should the Avs, like you said, you talked about them going for forward depth. Do names like Grant and Kulikov make sense to you?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I couldn't really I couldn't pick out a name for you right now. I'd have to go look at the depth charts of other NHL teams because I definitely don't know
Right.
them all that well. But you know, probably something along those lines. Yeah, Kuliak.
I'm
Kuliak
gonna
might not be a bad shout actually. What are his stats for this year? I'm interested.
I'm gonna go look at that right now. And
That's what
then
I'm wondering.
while I'm doing that on the phone research, Jackie, what's your answer to this poll? Go for a two C, do nothing, or other, and if it's other, what's your other?
Okay, I'm gonna spoil it first and say my answer's other, but I do want to address the 2C thing is that
Okay,
I don't even really think they need a 2C. Like,
same.
yes, in a perfect world, if you could just teleport in Kadri or someone like Pierre-Luc Dubois or Horvat or any great 2C, wonderful. But if you look at like Comfers had a better year than expected, I think Rodriguez has had a better year than expected. Um, I don't know if Newhook's really a fit on that second line this year, but it it helps that he's looking good at 3C at least.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't. If you believe that Landeskog is going to play, and if you believe that Nichushkin is going to play for the most part, I think their top six is okay. Like I really, unless they're able to get something long term, I just really don't think they need a 2C. It's just been such the fixation since the summer. And I don't think that's where their holes are anymore, really.
I agree, and
So
I think that was like exacerbated almost by winning and by Nazem Kadri's impact on the postseason, because it felt like that was kind of an affirmation or confirmation that the Avs were just a 2C away, and they finally got one. Even though we had him for 3 years essentially, it was like, oh, they finally got the performance from their 2C that they needed, which I think is why people are obsessed. Add to that Nazem Kadri was an incredibly impactful player during his time here, both on and off the ice. It's kind of become borderline obsession with filling that void. But like I'm with you, Jackie. I don't necessarily think that there's anything. I mean, obviously you want a 2C who's going to have a career year, sure. But that's an exception to the rule. And you have to find a sustainable roster, not a roster that's top heavy that you have to, go mortgaging all of your youth and all of your picks to keep top heavy. Like that's not something that lasts. Evan, do you agree with that, or is that just me?
No, I certainly agree with you there. It's I mean that's why I think the Avs moved on from Kadri because he was asking for 7 years and $7 million, and that would have taken him to what was it 38, 39, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Old, and that's when you're 36 years old, probably ended up on the third line at that point. I feel like at best, that $7 million is not going to look all that great on you, and so I think it's definitely you're right about people definitely like infatuating over it because it's like it happened. They finally got their 2C. They got Kadri. They did it. They did it. They won the cup because of it, so on and so forth. Yes, that's obviously huge, but you also have to look at like the entire team as a whole. Obviously, you've got Burakovsky who's now gone. The defense for the most part was healthy. Jack Johnson was a solid replacement for Sam Girard when he broke his sternum in the second round. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was all a well-oiled machine that worked out
Right.
really, really well. And it's hard to do it twice. That's why when Tampa has made it to 3 Stanley Cup finals in a row, it's super impressive. And of course, the Avs are hoping to do the same, but it's under different circumstances. And that's why I think that the top six is also okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
you've got your guys that are gonna get you there. Like we've
Yeah.
already seen it too this year when Nichushkin returned. Like
It's a totally
the
different
top
story.
six, yeah,
Yeah.
the top six looked like a top six
Kind of
again.
comes together. Yeah.
Now, imagine when Landeskog is back, then it's really gonna click. So
Yeah.
then it's really dealing with the depth of this team, which is why I think someone on the fourth line would be better. And I actually was just looking right now on Daily Faceoff to look at the line pairs because I remember seeing a name from Arizona that I thought was interesting. He does play on the first line right now, so I don't know how likely it would be. And I've seen his name thrown out a couple of times in our comments, but Nick Schmaltz.
Hmm.
He could, but I don't know. That one seems a little bit
my
harder to get. So I don't know.
my favorite poach from Arizona would be Lawson Krause.
or
He'd
Kraus.
be
I was gonna.
he
Mhm.
he'd be one of those RFA buys though, so it'd be kind of similar to like a Lekanen situation. Um,
Okay.
I think Bukestad, if I'm saying his name right, a lot of these names I never really ever said out loud. So, but I think he's like the favorite fourth line trade chip, which I could see the Avs have interested in him. I believe his salary is really low on expiring contract. Fourth line center. I think that's what they're going to look at because even if they say Helm's going to skate or whatever, like they just cannot count on him. If he ever comes back and can play for any meaningful stretch, then it's like a bonus. But
Right.
I think I think what they're really going to target is a 4C. I think Nieto was like their bottom six wing, PK help, and then I think the next thing they want is a 4C that can do the same. So my answer for other is either that or if somehow they're able to pull off another one of these RFA deals, but they're going to need assets for that, and I don't think they have them anymore. So if they really wanted to make a big move and get creative, would be to move one of their own expiring contracts, acquire assets, and then use that to make one of these RFA deals. To
Right.
me, that's like their quote unquote big move. It's not going to be the next biggest rental on the list. It's
That's a
going to be
pretty
something.
slick way though, because as you know,
Yeah,
Lekkonen's still here, and he's on a like
exact.
a pretty reasonable contract too.
So to me, that's like if something was going to happen, that'd be like their big move. But a lot of things have to fall in place for that. They'd
Yeah.
have to be willing to move one of their expiring contracts. They'd have to get the right deal. They'd have to get the perfect deal in that direction, and then the perfect deal to get the RFA. So I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to have a quieter deadline. I think they're just
Okay.
going to get their 4C and call it good. And maybe Jack Johnson because they
Right on
probably
that.
already have that deal agreed to with Chicago. So
Yeah. Yeah.
How about
Yeah.
this name? How about the? I'm now just scrolling on Daily Faceoff and just exploring
Having a
because
day.
why not? I know,
Yeah.
right? How about this name? How about a reunion with Derek Brassard from
no,
Whoa.
Ottawa?
I think
No,
he's so washed up.
Yeah.
No.
Jackie's
Um
like, please no.
uh
just a shout. That's all.
but no, I think you're right. Look for former players because it's not a coincidence at this
Systematically.
point, right? Like
Yeah.
they seem to really value guys that they know fit the with their existing players, fit with Bednar, his style, the system.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other I wonder about Stastny if
That would
now I know
be
Carolina is very good, but the reason why they would do it is he makes I think like $2 million, so they'd move him to free up cap space so they could make a bigger move.
right.
And then the Avs could benefit from if they're looking for something smaller, then they could get one of these guys. I think also Pittsburgh Teddy Bluger is another one, but he's not an old friend. But that's sort of
Right.
in the same line of that strategy. But I think you're
I
definitely
love
right
I
in
love
thinking
I love
about
that
old.
idea of Stastny because that might satisfy like the homers who are like, we need a 2C. They like, there's your 2C, even though that's not
Yeah,
what
It's like
at
it's
all what
Paul
he is anymore.
Stastny.
the
Yeah.
two C
Yeah.
from 10 years ago, maybe, but
And I know
Yeah.
he never played under Bednar. It's not quite the same thing, but he definitely, played with Landeskog and McKinnon, and
Yeah.
yeah, I don't
he's
know. I don't see Carolina selling at the deadline. I
they'd
don't
only do
see
it to
it.
get money. Like I said, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be just they're obviously gonna buy it to win, but it would be like a cap thing if they did it. But I think you're on the right track about former players. We gotta think
Yeah,
about
I think
anyone
so
else who's
too.
out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
If
I'm here today with Jackie and Evan. Sorry, Jackie, didn't mean to cut you off there.
no, go ahead.
But I'm here with you two great writers over at milehighhockey.com. Head on over to milehighhockey.com for their latest work. We're working on a roundtable right now that should be dropping in the next couple of days. Jackie, you're usually the one that kind of sends around the roundtables. Tell me kind of like what went into your thinking with some of the questions there, and like what's your general thought on the Avs outlook heading into the second half of the season.
Well, it's funny. I started the roundtable during their bad streak, so it's kind of
Nice.
funny because
Yeah.
um, you kind of need to think about the tone or the vibe of what's going on, and then if it shifts, you kind of need to um, kind of pivot a little bit.
Right.
I just like to both think about like, what we don't like, what we hope for in the future. So right now the trade deadline is going to be on everybody's mind. So we
Right.
definitely have some thoughts about that. And then just
Perfect.
always a little section on maybe a prediction or something where we can look back on and see we were so right, we were so wrong.
Yeah.
And and
Which I'm usually
so
in the latter of those phrases.
so kind of see how the rest of the season goes. I'm sure we'll do another one after the trade deadline and really when we get into the stretch run and stuff. But it's good to take a little bit of the pulse of how we're thinking, which probably reflects a lot of what the fan base is thinking and things like that.
Yeah, my favorite part is the predictions because I love making a fool of myself. Um, but yeah, thank you for sending that around, and I love that approach to articles because we, like you said, it's like you get opinions from all the writers, and often it mirrors kind of the differing opinions of the fan base, and so it kind of gives everyone a platform to see how their opinions kind of combine with others, even just within our kind of thinking in our project, a little project over here. So, Evan, with the break is the All Star game, and we've kind of not even talked about it even a little bit because I mean I don't mean to downplay it or anything, but I think it's a cool thing, especially love the presence of Avalanche members and the representation of Colorado being a hockey state and having the best team in the world right now. But it's something that I don't really get too excited for. I'm more into the competitive side of the sport. Tell me, do you agree with that, or are you locked in to the All Star game when it comes around?
No, I'm definitely not into like the oh yeah, it's the All-Star game. Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah.
paint my face for it and like be super pumped about it. I'm
Yeah.
not up to that level, but I don't think I'm as far down as you are. Like I
Right.
definitely think there's some excitement to it. I was actually just looking up too to see if the participants for the skills events had been announced yet, but I didn't see anything about it
They
unless you had
haven't, but
heard anything.
there's like a
So
dunk tank thing going on. So you shoot at a target, and one of your
it's
fellow
Florida, man.
players, yeah, it gets dunk
I
tanked.
don't know.
Jackie, what do you
It's
think? Like, is
Florida.
there a favorite segment of the All Star action that you have, or are you just like me, you're not all that into it?
It has its pluses and minuses, I guess you could say. Like I like the honor, especially since
For
our guys
sure.
haven't gone like 8 or 10 times. I mean, McKinnon's getting up there where, yeah, he's kind of done it, but it's still really cool to see Miko and Makar like they're not jaded about it yet.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
um, and I like a platform for them to show off their skill, like the breakaway challenge is cool or the accuracy, things like that. I know that every year they try to do something a little bit silly, so I don't know. I guess it's just interesting to see what they come up with. Like the fastest skater, I think would be cool. I just don't like them doing the lap because that's not really like hockey related. If maybe
Yeah.
they did more down and back, kind of like the the mountains or the
Like a
bag skate or
stop.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
the
It's not. I don't think they do that because it's not entertainment to the eye. I guess is like
Yeah,
a
it's just
But I agree with
it's
you,
just
Jackie. It
weird
says more
because
about power skating than being able to get to max speed and just glide. Absolutely.
yeah. So I wish maybe they combine it with like either going like up and back fast and then like shooting
Maybe
on a
the lap.
breakaway or
Yeah.
something that would look a little bit more like hockey related. But I haven't heard what events our guys will be doing. So I
yeah
guess I'm looking forward to that. It's always nice to appreciate someone's skill and talent, and I don't mind the game. I think because that it is more hockey related, like they're clear, and it is an avenue for them to show off their skill as well. So it is fun to see them make plays with other stars in the division, and so yeah, I don't mind it. It's the novelty, I guess, and I do want to plug right here that the AHL All Star game is usually not exciting whatsoever. But when a prospect of ours, like John Luke Foodie, who is leading the Eagles in scoring, finally got recognized, and that's like a huge deal for someone like him. Like I actually am going to watch the AHL All Star game because he will be in it. So
Yeah, that's really
I think
cool.
that's like a big deal. So I've watched him in the past. Miko made the All Star game, and I think AJ Greer did. I think those were really the last two like prospects of ours that was involved in the AHL All Star game. So I'm pumped about that. Honestly,
That's
I think
really
it's a
cool.
huge honor for especially someone so young and someone that's like a real prospect in the organization. I think the recognition does a lot for them.
Yeah, that's exciting
He
because it
deserves it.
says, yeah, it says something about at least one of the prospects that we have, of the limited amount of them we have. At least he's kind of getting recognition where he's at currently. And I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer. Like, I think it's all fun. I think it's all really cool. I guess really the only beef I have with it is who ends up in the All Star selection. Just based on the format of how they do the selection, I feel like it's partly all stars and partly just about being represented, which is fine. I just think that it shouldn't be considered all star game if it's not truly the best, handful of guys, no matter where they play or who they play for. Which is just that's kind of my only thing. So that kind of always takes away a little bit from it. Because in my opinion, like, and maybe this is just being a fan. But like Nichushkin is an all-star in my mind. And I'm sure there's fan bases in other teams that are a little bit more top heavy that could make strong arguments, for dudes on their team that just didn't get selected at all. So I just feel like there's an argument to be made that the format itself in terms of how they select the players could be changed, and then I think I would be totally in. But in terms of like what they do, it's all fun and games to me. Like I think it's like you said, a good display of their talents, especially for our guys. Like you mentioned, it's fun. I'm sure Miko will probably be on the breakaway challenge. I'm sure McKinnon will be in the fastest skater, and I bet Rantanen is in the like sauce toss passing thing because that just to me checks out for all of those guys. And they might have more than one event, but that's just the way I see it going. Um, Evan, do you have an issue with how they do like the player selection in the All Star, or are you cool with it?
No, I there's definitely some truth to your statement because I mean, having one from every team is acceptable and like I get that, but like who even is Chicago? Is it Patrick Kane for
No, it's
Chicago?
Seth
That's
Jones.
Yeah, Seth
Right.
Jones.
Like,
Yeah.
come on.
That's a stretch. And I don't know who Columbus is. I assume Anaheim is Trevor Zegras. Like, yeah,
Right.
Zegras makes sense, of course. But like, is it Goudreau for Columbus? Like, I'm trying
I
to
think it
think.
is. Now that
It
you
is
mention it, I think it is. I don't think Zegers was Anaheim's. I think it's someone
really.
else.
Maybe
Is
Terry.
it really
Troy
not
Terry.
Yeah.
Zegras? I
Yeah,
That's crazy.
which is why I don't mind so much that a lot of the teams are represented, but some of the choices are odd. Like Burakovsky didn't get picked for Seattle, which I thought was a little strange. Like he's been leading their team in scoring. Like yeah,
Yeah.
so some of the guys you expect to be there aren't, and that's a little odd. Like I think if they want to represent every team, which I get, like the fans want to see their guy or whatever, maybe they needed to invite more players. I know nobody wants to see like 100 guys there,
That's a good
but
point.
you know,
Yeah, you could like, and you could get the representation, but you could also say like the coach gets to pick the top, who's doing what in which, everything, and if you're not really gonna be on the cut, like at least you got the honor of being invited here to represent your team. But like, no offense, we don't need to showcase Seth Jones in this moment right now. It's probably better to get someone like Andre Burakovsky, who's representing a brand new market and who's probably someone that everybody's a fan of in that market, and they're losing a little slice of representation. So I'm with you guys. Like I think it's not that big of a deal really, but it's something that they could think about addressing, and it might satisfy because Jackie, you mentioned that it's an honor, and it is an honor. Like I don't mean to say that it's not, but it's slightly less of an honor when you know that some guys are getting in just because there's really no one else on the roster to be picked from but those guys on their current team. So obviously for the Avalanche, that's not the case. They're on a really good lineup and they're being selected. And I think they're one of however many teams to have 3 players represent. So that in and of itself, I think, is an honor for sure. So
I think it's three
um,
teams.
Three
Yeah, and I
teams
was
I think
won
it's
this.
surprised.
three.
I was actually surprised they had two from the fan vote. That
I
was,
know. I did not think
Pretty
McKinnon
cool.
was going to make it.
That goes
yeah.
to show how big the fan base is kind of getting. I think even in North America, let alone like just locally, which is that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
it's got some fun to it. I know you were at the one in Vegas last year, so maybe it's a little bit
yeah.
different from your
Well,
end of
I
like.
maybe that's why I have this opinion because like that was. Let me add context though. I was supposed to go to the game and the skills contest. I ended up just being able to go to the skills competition because I had a conflicting schedule thing kind of during the All Star game itself.
Oh, I
So
didn't
I went
realize
to
that.
the skills competition, and as a spectator, that was so boring. Which I understand it was a made for TV event, but as like somebody who paid for the ticket, I was like, damn, this was a mistake because it was a pretty pricey ticket, and it was just a made for TV event that really wasn't catered to the arena and like even when they did the challenge where Kadri was shooting plates, that was like shot hours before on the strip. It wasn't even happening live, because I was like, oh, that'll be sick. Like I just want to go watch that, like out on the ponds. Let's go watch that. But all that stuff had already happened, so
Yeah.
that may have added a little bias to my opinion because it felt like that's who it should be for are the people who are like traveling and buying tickets to go cheer on the players that represent their teams. It should be more of a made for the experience, kind of like the Stadium Series. I think it's more for the person there, or at least it's intended to be, than it is like a television event. Although it makes for the best backdrop. So that's just kind of my thought on the matter. I'm
No,
excited
that
though. Yeah,
I think
go
those
ahead,
are all
Jack.
good points. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you had gone. So yeah, that makes total sense that you just you don't really you're not really connecting with the experience the way they do it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and it's not that they don't do it well. Like it was really cool, and all of the city around the All-Star game was set up in a way that was obviously very very fun, like some stuff you could interact with. But it was really like I was there to like see my favorite players and to see them do the goofy stuff, and it just wasn't as involved and engaged from a fan standpoint as I was kind of hoping. So that's all right though. Like I'm excited.
Maybe is yeah, maybe it's because they were catering to Vegas because it was in Vegas
Yeah,
and it was just,
yeah, it's a
that they
good
want the
point.
Vegas lifestyle. I feel like aren't they doing something like on the beach
I think
in
so.
Yeah,
this one in Florida? Like,
I
I don't
think they've
know.
decided they like that. I think
that's
the
the
initial
dunk
idea
tank
was
thing,
like
I
some
think.
sort of alligator pit or something, and it
Oh
sounds
my
like
Oh
they've
my
moved away
gosh.
from I they might have moved away from that, but
Players
Oh,
Union
that's
had something to
such a
say.
that's such a Florida thing too. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
and
Oh my
But
so
goodness.
I get it. Like they're really trying to theme it around the city, which is cool. Like it's not just an arena that they're going to; it's like the city and everything. And I like that with like the really retro, like Miami Art Deco
Yeah,
look
that's cool.
jerseys and stuff. So they're really trying to like theme it up, which I think is cool. But yeah, you're gonna end up with more of these pre-taped outside things, like on the
Yep.
beach and whatever else that they do.
So I'll just save my
guess
money
we'll
and stay
see.
home and watch it on TV where
Yeah.
it's awesome. Yeah.
What now? Okay, hold on. Theoretically
Yeah.
here. What would they
Yeah.
do what do they do when the All-Star game is in Denver next? What's like the pre-taped event? Like, is it gonna be like
Like on a
It's
skiing
mountain
got
or
to
something.
be
related?
on a
Yeah.
ski.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be
Like
ski
Red
related
Rocks, something at Red Rocks maybe,
yeah.
or
It's
you know.
That
probably
would be
like a
nice.
down. It's one of those skate Moto X combination courses. No, I think the Players Union would have a problem with that too.
They might. I don't know. Just a
Yeah,
fun
it's a
thought.
good
I mean,
question.
the All-Star game hasn't been here since what, 2000 like 1
I
or
don't think the
Yeah,
Avs
something,
want to
right?
invest in it for it
That's
though.
fair.
I don't think it's ever
yeah.
coming back.
That would
I'd like
require.
to have a draft. I went to the draft
That would
once.
be
I
cool.
loved that experience. So
I would
Well, we
love
have
the
like
draft.
Denver has the whole McGregor Square thing going too.